I want to start by thanking everyone taking the time to read this. I never thought I'd be the one sharing a story like this, but after everything that's happened, I need to let it out. If you've ever dealt with narcissistic parents, you'll probably understand the kind of chaos I'm about to describe. I spent most of my life trying to be the perfect child, the one who always stepped up, who made sure my parents were taken care of, even when they didn't deserve it. They weren't abusive in a physical way, but they had a knack for draining you emotionally, making you feel like you owed them for simply existing. When I succeeded, they took credit. When I failed, it was all my fault. When my son was born, I hoped things might change. He loved his grandparents, and for a while, it seemed like they genuinely cared about him too. So, when he was 8, I let him stay with them for a short time because he wanted to be closer to them. I thought I was doing something good, something that would strengthen our family bond. But the truth is, my parents only value people when they can use them. What I didn't know was that while I was sacrificing for them, they were spreading lies that I'd abandoned them, that they were struggling, that I was barely helping, and they had to rely on charity from relatives. Meanwhile, I was the one paying their rent, covering their bills, and ensuring they had everything they needed. They never said a word about this to me. They acted like everything was fine, like we were on good terms. I found out the truth by accident. I live 200 miles from most of my family, so we don't see each other often. But at my brother's birthday party, I ran into my older sister, who I rarely see. We got to talking, and the topic of our parents came up. She mentioned how tough things had been for her, how she and another relative had been sending them money every month because their house had supposedly burned down. At first, I laughed, thinking she was joking. Their house was fine, I'd been there just weeks earlier, but her face told me she was serious. That's when we started piecing it together. It turned out my parents had been lying to everyone. They told me they were fine while secretly claiming to others that they were broke. They painted me as the selfish son who didn't care while taking money from my sister and other relatives. They never mentioned this to me, never showed gratitude for what I was doing. They just took everything they could while turning people against me at the same time. That night, everything exploded. There was yelling, accusations flying back and forth. My sister was furious, not just at them, but at herself for believing them. I felt sick. All the times I thought my family was drifting apart, I blamed it on life getting in the way. But no, my parents had poisoned everything. They made me the villain to keep their scam going. I called my son, told him to pack his things, and we left that night. 4 days later, my parents showed up at my house acting like nothing had happened. They wanted to talk. When I saw their faces, something inside me broke. I just stared for a moment, then quietly shut the door on them. That's when the threats started. They said if I didn't open the door, they'd stop looking after my son, as if that scared me, as if I needed them. That's when I stepped back out and the real fight began. We screamed at each other in the driveway for over an hour. Every resentment, every hidden truth, every buried grievance came pouring out at once. They called me ungrateful, selfish, a terrible son. I threw every lie they'd told back in their faces. The longer it went on, the more desperate they got. Finally, I ended it. I said I was done paying their rent. When those words left my mouth, the color drained from their faces. They'd built their whole scheme assuming I'd always bail them out, that no matter what they did, I'd never fully cut them off. But now they stood on my driveway, realizing for the first time that I wasn't their safety net anymore. And the best part? That was just the beginning. The moment I said I'd stop paying their rent, everything changed. My parents stood there frozen. For the first time in my life, they were speechless. No fake concern, no calculated guilt trips, just pure panic. And that silence, it was the most satisfying feeling I'd ever had. Then, as expected, the meltdown began. First came disbelief. They acted like they'd misheard, like maybe I was just upset and making empty threats. Then came the bargaining. They suddenly understood my anger and wanted to make things right. But it was too late. When I stood firm, the rage kicked in. My father started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how he'd given up everything to raise me. My mother, always the more cunning one, played the victim. She clutched her chest and acted like I was literally killing her with stress. I just stood there watching her unravel. Then came the low blows. They started saying I was ruining my son's future, that I was depriving him of his grandparents, that I was setting a terrible example. It was almost laughable. After everything they'd done, they still thought they held the moral high ground. I let them rant for a bit, but then I hit them with the full truth. I told them I knew everything, about the lies they told my sister and other relatives, about the fake house fire, the sob stories, the money they'd been pocketing behind my back. And that's when real fear set in. They started denying it all, of course. But the problem with liars is that when they're caught, they stumble and start contradicting themselves. Within minutes, they were tripping over their own stories, changing their version of events over and over. One second, they'd never taken money from my sister. The next, they'd only borrowed a little because they were desperate. Then my mother slipped and admitted they needed others to feel sorry for them. They were completely exposed, and they knew it. I told them I was done. No more rent, no more bills, no more help of any kind. I told them they were on their own. My mother's face twisted like she'd swallowed glass. My father just stared, looking at me like I was a stranger. For once, I was in control. Then I turned and walked inside. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there listening as they banged, shouted, threatened, and finally lingered outside in silence for what felt like forever before driving away. That night, I sat on my couch, staring at my phone. I knew this wasn't over. People like them don't just accept consequences. They come back, they plot, they strike again. I just didn't expect them to strike so soon. I woke up the next morning to over a dozen missed calls and texts from family. Some were from my sister, checking on me. Others were from relatives I barely spoke to, demanding to know why I was abandoning my parents in their time of need. And right away, I knew exactly what had happened. My parents had gone straight to everyone with a new sob story. I took a deep breath and opened the first voicemail. It was my aunt, furious, saying she couldn't believe I'd turned my back on my parents after everything they'd done for me. Another was from my uncle, talking about family duty and how disappointed he was. But the worst came from my mother herself. She didn't yell or beg. Instead, she launched a masterclass in guilt. She said she and my father were heartbroken, that they never imagined I'd throw them away like garbage. She ended with a chilling line. "I hope you can live with yourself after this, James." It was textbook manipulation. They weren't sorry for lying, for using me, for turning my family against me. They were only sorry I'd stopped playing along. I called my sister. When she picked up, she let out a heavy sigh. "I'm guessing you got the messages?" I told her everything. How they'd shown up at my house, how I'd shut them out, how I'd finally refused to pay their rent. She wasn't surprised, but she was livid. "You make it sound like you kicked them out onto the street," she said, "like they're homeless and you don't care." It was ridiculous. My parents weren't broke, they had money, just not enough for their greed. And they definitely weren't homeless. They still had the same house, the same life, just without my financial support to pad their savings. My sister and I spent the next hour untangling their web of lies. It turned out they'd told every relative a different version of the story. To some, I'd cut them off out of the blue. To others, I was lashing out over imagined slights. They even told one cousin I was having a mental breakdown and that they were worried for my son's safety. That part cut deep. They were willing to use my own child against me. I asked her what she thought I should do. She sighed. "I don't know, James, but I know this. If you don't handle this now, they'll make sure the whole family turns against you." She was right. My parents wouldn't stop. And if I didn't act fast, they'd ruin every relationship I had left. So I made a decision. I was going to expose them once and for all. I thought I'd handled it. I'd talked to my sister, cleared things up with a few relatives, and started feeling like I was in control. But then, as I was about to end the call, my sister's tone shifted. She was looking at something off-screen. "James, I think you need to check your front yard." That sentence sent a chill through me. I got up, walked to the window, and when I looked outside, my heart sank. My parents were sitting on my front lawn, not just standing, not knocking, but camped out in lawn chairs like they were settling in for a siege. Their car was parked in my driveway. My mother was on her phone, and my father sat with his arms crossed, staring at my house like he was ready for a long wait. I just stood there, completely stunned. This was beyond anything I'd expected. I thought they'd try emotional blackmail through calls, maybe send another relative to guilt me. But this was public humiliation. They wanted my neighbors to see. They wanted to make a scene, to paint me as the cold-hearted son who'd abandoned his poor, helpless parents. I ended the call with my sister and stepped outside. When my mother saw me, she put down her phone like she was expecting me to cave. "We're not leaving until you talk," she said, calm as if she wasn't camped out on my property. I wasn't going to fall for their trap. If I started yelling, I'd look unhinged. If I ignored them, they'd just stay forever, milking every second. I had to end this in a way they wouldn't expect. So I turned around, pulled out my phone, and took a picture of them. They both froze. My father sat up straight, my mother's face twitched. I could see their confusion, their fleeting fear. They hadn't planned for this. Without a word, I went back inside, sat down, and started typing. I posted the picture with a short caption. For anyone wondering why I cut them off, this is what they do when they don't get their way. Within minutes, my phone blew up. My sister called back, laughing in disbelief. Friends texted, asking if I was serious. Even relatives who'd been on their side were shocked. And then the best part, my parents saw it. I watched through the window as my mother checked her phone and gasped. My father grabbed his and turned red. They whispered frantically, trying to figure out how to spin this. But they couldn't. They'd played the victim for so long, lied for so long, twisted every story to look innocent. But now, for the first time, everyone saw them for what they were. I expected them to bang on the door, to scream. Instead, they got up, grabbed their chairs in a hurry, and practically ran to their car. My father peeled out so fast he nearly hit my mailbox. And just like that, they were gone. But the damage was done. My post had spread, and now there was no going back. I thought it was over. I thought my parents had finally realized their manipulation had failed. When they sped off, I figured their embarrassment was enough to stop them. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to another flood of texts and missed calls. But this time, it wasn't just family. It was people I hadn't spoken to in years, old classmates, childhood neighbors, even a former coworker. My stomach dropped before I even looked. The first message read, "Man, your mom is losing it online." I checked right away, and there it was. A long, furious post from my mother, naming me directly, calling me a cruel, ungrateful son who'd publicly humiliated his parents after they'd devoted their lives to him. She called me mentally unstable, claimed I'd always had anger issues. And worst of all, she heavily implied my son wasn't safe with me. That part made my hands shake. This wasn't just manipulation anymore, this was an attack. She'd obviously written it in a rush. It was a messy mix of half-truths and outright lies, but the damage was done. The comments were a mess. Some people defended me, seeing through her tactics. Others bought into it, lamenting how kids abandon their parents. Then I saw it. My father's comment, short and simple, "We just want to see our grandson." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. They couldn't get to me, so they went after my son. I knew I had to act fast. I screenshotted my mother's post along with older messages. Then I wrote a short response. For anyone wondering about the truth, here it is. My parents have lied and manipulated for years. They've taken money through deceit, pitted family against each other, and now that I've cut them off, they're trying to smear me publicly. I don't have anger issues. I don't have a history of instability. Most importantly, my son is perfectly safe and happy. If you choose to believe them, that's your choice. But I'm done with their games. I posted it and logged off. I wasn't going to refresh obsessively waiting for reactions. I'd done what I needed to, but I hadn't expected it to go viral. By the afternoon, strangers were sharing it. Some shared their own stories of toxic parents. Others called out my mother's lies directly. The pressure built. And by evening, she deleted everything. But the damage was to them. People who'd supported them before were now questioning. Relatives who'd taken their side apologized. Even my uncle, who'd sent money for their burned-down house, texted me. I didn't know how bad they were. For the first time, their web of lies was falling apart. And just when I thought I'd won, an unknown number called. I answered, expecting a relative. Instead, a cold, professional voice said, "This is Child Protective Services. We've received a report of neglect and need to visit your home." I froze. They'd done it. My parents had called CPS. I sat there, gripping my phone until my knuckles turned white. CPS. My own parents had reported me. I knew their manipulation. I knew their desperation. But this was pure spite. I took a deep breath. I wasn't scared. My son was loved, cared for, and happy. There was no case against me, but that wasn't the point. The point was that they were willing to weaponize a system meant to protect kids just to punish me for standing up to them. That was the final straw. They'd declared war. I called my sister first. She picked up immediately, her voice tense. "What now?" When I told her, she exploded. She cursed, calling them every name in the book. I'd never heard her so angry, and it was a relief to know I wasn't alone. Then she said something that chilled me. "What's scary is, what if they planted something, made up evidence of neglect?" I hadn't thought of that, but she was right. If they were willing to lie to CPS, what else would they try? I hung up and called my parents. They answered right away, like they were waiting for me to break. My mother's voice was sickeningly sweet. "James, we've been so worried." I cut her off. "I know you called CPS." Silence. Then my father spoke, his voice careful. "We were just concerned about our grandson. We had no choice." No choice. Something inside me snapped. I let them have it. I told them if they ever pulled this again, I'd destroy them legally. A restraining order so tight they couldn't even mention my name without breaking it. I'd expose them to every family member, every mutual friend, every person they'd ever lied to. I heard my mother's breathing quicken. My father, usually the loud one, was silent. That's when I knew they were truly scared. Then I delivered the final blow. "You will never see my son again," my mother whimpered. My father tried to backtrack, saying I was overreacting, that family fights get out of hand. I wasn't done. I told them their lies, their manipulation, their guilt trips were over. They'd spent their lives controlling people, twisting truths, playing the victim. But now, for the first time, they had no power over me. Then I hung up. And just like that, they were powerless. The CPS visit happened 2 days later. A woman came, polite but thorough. She looked around, talked to my son, and within 20 minutes she saw the truth. As she left, she gave me a look I'll never forget. "It's always family, isn't it?" she said, shaking her head. I didn't need to explain. She'd seen this before. Then came the fallout. My parents tried to reach out. Weak texts from my mother saying she missed us. A voicemail from my father pretending to be the concerned dad. I ignored it all, and that's when they gave up. Suddenly, they stopped trying. No more calls, no more attempts to reconnect. They'd lost. And me? For the first time in my life, I felt free. No guilt, no obligation, no more walking on eggshells, just peace. I'd won. For months, there was silence, total silence. My parents vanished from my life like they'd never existed. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, the peace I'd always wanted. Then, out of nowhere, my father showed up at my job. It was a regular Thursday. I was working when a coworker knocked, looking uneasy. James, there's someone at the front desk asking for you. Says he's your dad." My stomach twisted. What was he doing here? I walked to the front, and there he was, my father. He looked awful, older, fragile, with dark circles under his eyes, and for the first time, genuinely nervous. I didn't say anything. I just crossed my arms and waited. He cleared his throat. "James, I just need to talk." I stared. He looked so different from the man who'd yelled in my driveway months ago about how ungrateful I was. This wasn't anger. This was defeat. Still, I wasn't going to give in. "Make it quick," I said. Then he said something I never expected. "Your mother left me." I froze. Of all the things I'd prepared for, this wasn't one of them. Apparently, after I cut them off, everything fell apart. Without my money, they had to face reality. The stress broke them. They turned on each other. My mother, always the schemer, decided to latch onto someone else rather than stay with my father. So she left. And now my father, who'd backed every lie, every plot, every manipulation, stood in front of me alone, looking completely broken. And you know what? I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just nothing. I shrugged. "Not my problem." His face fell. "James, please, I cut him off. "No, you both made your choices. Live with them." Then I turned and walked back inside, and just like that, it was truly over. Final thoughts. I never heard from my father again. My mother, from what I've heard, moved in with some distant relative and is probably pulling the same old tricks. But I don't care. If you connected with this story and felt the emotions behind it, please share it with others and let me know your thoughts. Your support means everything, and it helps bring more stories like this to light. Thank you for reading.